Good evening, Simon here, Explosive Action. Did you know there's a new Metallica album out called 72 Seasons? You might have missed that news, but today we're not talking about that album. We're going to talk about 9 albums that came out 72 seasons ago, 2005 specifically. So let's get into it. So Mark G with a C was the one that started this topic. I'm not too sure if he expected it to take off and be a response, but I thought it was a bit of a fun one. So the idea here was, the album's called 72 Seasons, and we could talk about if it's good or if it's not. It's not. And we're not going to do that. We're going to talk about albums that came out 72 seasons ago. 4 seasons per year, 18 years, 2005. We've got 9 albums here from 2005. That's 7 plus 2, 72. So let's get into them. I kind of did a bit of a random Discogs pick on this one, and I'm pretty happy with what came out. And the first one here is Lunar Aurora with Mond. Fantastic German black metal band. Probably one of my top 2 or 3 bands from Germany at all. Love Lunar Aurora. It's kind of your Ruins of Beveras kind of thing, Nagelfar, that kind of thing, but a little bit more spacey. You can sort of see on this one with the moon cover here, they've gone for a very spacey kind of theme. Out of their discography, this has got to be the heaviest sounding. I reckon this is pretty brutal sounding black metal for the band. Very much all over the map, those guys, so you know, you're never too sure what their album's going to sound like. They all have a bit of a similar sound, of course, but Mond is just incredibly heavy. This came out after 2004's Zyklus and before 2007's Anduct. I think Anduct is probably my personal favourite, but you can't go wrong with anything from Lunar Aurora. Yeah, so fantastic album, fantastic band. Check out some Lunar Aurora, definitely check out Mond. Next band's from America. This is some US medical themed death metal. In the Carcass vein, of course. Impaled, Death After Life. Look at that glorious cover. This comes after their pretty monumental album Mondo Medical a couple of years earlier. Impaled, if you don't know, is basically members of Exhumed and Ghoul, which we're not meant to know, but yeah, they're in Ghoul, doing a very Exhumed-like approach to Carcass's necroticism. That's essentially what Impaled is, but even funnier. They've made a lot more humour to it. You know, they've taken that Carcass lyric sheet and there's like samples and things. It's not just that, the band will recreate themselves from time to time being doctors, being surgeons, and having little stories and things in here. They're a very, very funny band. Awesome album. I like their entire discography, which isn't very big. Let's got to be said. Like, there's one after this. Then they recreated their first album in 2013. They re-recorded it due to a rights issue. They can't just reissue the first album, which is a shame. But the last 10 years they've recorded nothing, and they just tour. You know, it's kind of just that thing they do when Exhumed's not doing stuff, I think, is really what Impaled is these days. I'd love to see them. They look like they'd be a lot of fun to see live. I'm going to have to make do with seeing Exhumed next month though, because they're coming back out, which will be a lot of fun. But yeah, Death After Life, definitely one of the better ones from Impaled, so yeah, check them out. The next album is the 6th album from this particular band, which is quite good. This is Immolation with Harnessing Ruin. I reckon out of their discography, Harnessing Ruin gets overlooked quite a bit. Unholy Cult was a really big one that came just a couple of years before this one, in like I think 03. But this is still a really solid follow-up. It just seems to, maybe it's because the cover's so, it's just nothing much cover. It's pretty boring. Maybe that doesn't help. I guess the hit songs, I don't know, like key tracks may not be here, but as an album, as an entirety, it's a really good one. But, you know, saying that, the track on here, Our Saviour Sleeps, is a cracker. They did a video clip for the title track, Harnessing Ruin, which is your classic 2005 cheesy death metal video clip. Definitely worth checking out. But it's a solid album. I mean, it's Immolation doing their stompy New York satanic kind of death metal. So, yeah, you don't like God, you like Immolation, check them out. Next one's a project out of Switzerland. Definitely one of my favourite bands. In terms of black metal, this was when I first heard these guys, and it's a 3-piece. It was a different experience for me. Absolutely, I had not heard anything similar to this when I had heard this band. This is Darkspace, and this is their second album, just called 2. Wow, this is a side project of Winter, who is behind Paysage de Verre, which is definitely the more prolific band. He's been doing that thing since like 1999 or something along those lines, and is just smashing out albums and demos left, right, and center. In here, he's joined by 2 other guys, and their releases are far more restrained. They've only done 4 albums in a reasonably similar length of time. So yeah, obviously 2005, this one. I'll take it out of its slipcase, and it's not going to help you much. It's just very black with the logo. They're very, very sparse, and the idea is because it's all about sort of the sparsity of space, the terror of space. And I prefer, personally, this band and the cold, soulless atmosphere of space that the band portrays so well to Paysage de Verre. Paysage de Verre is being trapped in the winter storms and like snow blizzards. This is being trapped in space in your spacesuit, and the tether to your ship has come undone and you're floating off. And the sun's about to hit you. So it's noisy, blasting, atmospheric black metal spliced with ambient, dark soundscapes. There's sometimes just sporadic little samples from movie clips. Sometimes it's sound, sometimes it's words. They really like the movie Sunshine. That one comes through quite a bit in the stuff that they do. But yeah, Darkspace, it is just cold and desolate, and it's fantastic. 2005 and death metal was kind of a strange time. I'm not going to say that the genre was dying, but it was. It's not like it is the last 5 years, where every 5 minutes another death metal album comes out. It really wasn't like that. But there was a few key bigger bands that were still at it, and were still in their prime. And one of those bands absolutely was Nile, with Annihilation of the Wicked. One of their better albums for sure, one of their best. It doesn't quite, for me, hit the absolute high marks of the 3 albums that came before it, which would be very hard to do because those things are just stellar. But it's a pretty close 4th, I'll give you that. It's undeniably great. Cast Down the Heretic and Lash to the Slave Stick are worth the price of entry alone. But honestly, it's a great album, and it's one that I've been finding I'm listening to a lot more than I did at the time. Just because it's less familiar to me than the 3 that came before it. Like, I know every riff on Amongst the Catacombs backwards, but Annihilation of the Wicked, I'm still finding new things each time I listen to it. So, awesome album. Annihilation of the Wicked from Nile. Next one is the 3rd album from this particular band. They're out of Malta. This is Beheaded with Ominous Bloodline. This is, it sounds like it looks, right? With 2005, if you were either a long-term band like Nile or Immolation or Incantation doing your stuff and keep doing your stuff. If you weren't doing that, it was brutal death metal and we're getting slam and all those kinds of things, and your Deeds of Flesh kinds of music, and Beheaded fit into that side of things. Brutal, technical death metal in the style you would expect from a band that is signed to Unique Leader Records, absolutely. Following that Deeds of Flesh template mixed with sort of early Suffocation and that tight ping snare of Devourment. That's kind of Beheaded's shtick, that's what they do. Yeah, I really dig this one. My personal favourites for the band, their debut, Perpetual Mockery, is a classic in death metal, I would say. I think a lot of people would agree. But their 2012 album, Never to Dawn, that for me is the album I listen to the most. It's just got such good riffs on it. But this one's the one before it and is really, really good as well. So yeah, it hits you where you want it to hit you. Beheaded with Ominous Bloodline. Solid album, good fun death metal out of Malta. Speaking of Deeds of Flesh, here's some Deeds of Flesh. This is Crown of Souls. Obviously it came out in 2005. The 6th album from this band. They're from California. Another album, I think, in terms of discography, gets quite overlooked. They were definitely getting more and more technical at this point. By 2008, they did an album called Of What's to Come, and then 2013 they did Portals of Canaan. Those albums sort of pushed them further into the technical side of things. Still brutal and death metal and technical, but the focus was definitely more on being a technical band than anything else by that point. I love Of What's to Come. I think that's fantastic. Crown of Souls here is kind of a hybrid mix. It's that earlier stuff, you know, the inbreeding, the anthropophagy or whatever the hell it is, and approaching that more technical style. They've always been technical, but getting more and more. It's a 50-50 split here on Crown of Souls. I think it works really well. So much so that I bought the shirt. You've seen me wear it on this channel before. So yeah, it's a mix of like chug riffs and finger tapping. It's one of those. It's good stuff. Deeds of Flesh, Crown of Souls. Like I said, I liked it so much, I bought the shirt. So we've done the 7, now we're going to do the 2, and because it's me and it's my channel, those 2 are going to be Australian, Aussie represent. The first one here I guarantee most of you have never heard of, which will be a shame, and I hope that some of you do go and check the links in the description. That is a plug, links in the description to listen to things. This is Infernal Method with Architecture of Instinct, which is kind of a mouthful of a title, but man, this album, really good. This band were reasonably prominent in the Sydney scene at the time, that sort of 2001 to 2005 when this came out. They were starting to make a bit of a name for themselves. They were gigging quite heavily. They got supports with, I think it was Arch Enemy was one of the bigger ones they had supports on. Melodic death metal, very much in a Dark Tranquility, The Mind's Eye, At the Gate Slaughter of the Soul, In Flames Horacle, basically all that kind of stuff. Which, you know, with the Majesty's album that just came out, we're getting a bit more nostalgic for that style, and you have to think back, if you lived through that time, your foot was either firmly in the melodic death metal camp or it was right out, you were nowhere near that ocean. You hated it, but you know, I think people have softened in general and are quite happy to have some melodic riffs in their death metal these days. So, you know, something like Infernal Method is definitely worth revisiting. It's worth paying the price of entry alone just for the first track, which is Reanimating the Wicked. That track they were gigging on the demo and they were playing for years. Such good riffs on that song particularly. The guitar on this one, there's 2 guitarists, but Peter Perrick, I think that might have actually been his band, his creation. I think, I could be wrong, but he was all over the Sydney scene and a very accomplished guitar player in Automation, Dead Spawn, went to Dungeon for a bit, played briefly in Nazul, all kinds of stuff. As was Graham Good on the drums on this thing. The drums are fantastic, very peppery, very melodic death metal. He was in most of those same bands as well. And yeah, definitely got to shout out to my buddy Evan, who did the vocals on this album, did a great job. And this has always been a fun album. So Infernal Method, Architecture of Distinct Instinct. I told you, it's a mouthful, this one. Awesome Sydney melodic death metal from 2005. And arguably leaving the best till last, and you could probably debate that one in the comments if you want, but definitely one of the more respected albums and bands to come out of the Australian scene. If you know, you know. I'm talking about Stargazer with the scream that tore the sky. Another mouthful. These guys are out of Adelaide and are pretty much world renowned. Like, they're one of those bands that it's not like your top charting death metal or anything like that, but the people that know, they know. And they know this album. This is their debut full length after doing a split and a few EPs and things like that. Avant-garde black death metal is probably the best way to pigeonhole it, but it is pretty damn unique. It's stood the test of time for sure. I would say personally only their last album even compares to this one. They've got a great discography, but this one really stands out for me. It's a 2-piece band, at least at this time, featuring Denny Blake and Damon Good, both from Cauldron Black Ram and Misery's Omen, band around the time. And Damon's also in Mournful Congregation and now is in Void Ceremony. So you're hearing his stuff on 20 Bucks Spin. But it is such a good album. It really is. One of the most unique things to come into the death metal landscape, and one of the best exports we've had out of this country. So Stargazer, the scream that tore the sky. And that is my 7+2 albums, 72 seasons, 18 years, 2005 albums that, well, let's just face it, they're better than the latest Metallica album, that's for sure. Hope you enjoyed this little video, and cheers to Mark G with a C for putting the seeds into the ground for sowing this idea. I think it's a pretty good one. I'd like to see some other responses to this too. So yeah, let me know your 2005 albums that you reckon are better than the latest Metallica. And yeah, check out the links in the description below. You can give a listen to all this stuff. Make sure you like, subscribe, check out this thing, check out this thing. See you next time.